Good afternoon, Year 10. So, we're going to continue with our lessons on human reproduction. We had a lesson on general puberty, we had a lesson on menstrual cycle, we talked about contraception, and now we're going to move on from how to stop people having babies to how to help them have babies. So today we're going to talk about infertility. Now there's two starter questions there, so I want you to have a think about these ones. I don't necessarily need you to write them down like I would in class. So I'd like you to have a think about what the answers to these are. I'm going to give you the answers as soon as you unpause me. So, infertility. Infertility is, and I will just put some board. Okay, infertility is where a couple struggle to have a child. They are attempting to have a child for a prolonged period of time and they are not able to. Now, you don't diagnose this for quite a long time. You have been trying for a baby for over a year, I believe, before you classify yourself as having struggled with infertility. But the fact of the matter is that infertility is just struggling to have a child. Causes of infertility, well, that's what we're going to talk about now. So if you could write yourself down a definition for infertility, and then we're going to move on to this pie chart. Now, this pie chart shows all the different problems you can have that would cause infertility. Now, I would like you to have a look at those three questions there. I don't need you to draw the pie chart into your books. I don't actually need you to know the percentages at all, but you can definitely be asked this kind of question in an exam. I definitely want you to be able to think of some issues that might cause infertility if you were asked about them. So have a look at those three questions. Not too difficult, I would hope. Again, pause me and we'll go through the answers. So, the percentage caused by problems with ovulation. Well, we hopefully should all know that should all add up to 100%. So if we add up the numbers, you've got 23, add 5 is 28, add 33 is 61, add sperm problem 21 is 82, so I think 18%. If I've done my maths wrong there, I'll apologise. Do it one more time. 54, 59, 82, yes, 18% with ovulation. What problems might there be with sperm that cause issues with fertility? So sperm problem is 21%. You're looking at things like a low sperm number, not producing enough sperm, producing sperm that don't swim particularly well or swim too slowly, so they die before they reach the egg. Sperm that don't have the right amount of DNA in them, sperm which don't have acrosomes that can burn a hole in the outside of the egg. Loads of different issues. The main issue is with low sperm count though, not producing enough sperm. And whilst that is an issue, and it's the biggest issue that men can have that could cause infertility, it's certainly not the biggest issue that causes infertility. Because in all honesty, the male system is a lot simpler than the female system, and so it's a lot less likely to go wrong. Now, why is it important that the uterus has the right amount of lining? We said when we're talking about the menstrual cycle, that's all about making sure that the growing embryo has enough nutrients and enough of a place to attach itself onto so that it won't be washed away at any point. Fine. Now, a very common cause, as we've said, about 18% of infertility is a lack of ovulation because an egg doesn't develop or because it's not released. Now, bear in mind that 33% were unexplained. Some of that will be ovulation issues as well. So it's probably well over a fifth, towards maybe even around a third, would be caused by ovulation issues. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is how we could fix ovulation issues. And this is the first way we're going to help people who are infertile. So again, three questions there. Can you please write them down in full sentences? I need you to write down in full sentences because I need you to understand this bit very well. It's going to come up a lot. Again, pause me. So, what causes eggs to develop? Hopefully you all remember from our menstrual cycle topic that there is a hormone called FSH, which is used to make eggs mature, is perhaps a better word, and it's released by the pituitary, hits the ovaries, and it causes the egg to develop. What causes them to be released? Well, now we're talking about LH. LH. And again, hopefully we all remember that from the menstrual cycle. Again, that's released by the pituitary gland. Remember, all acronyms, pituitary gland. How could you fix any issues with ovulation? Well, hopefully we're starting to think maybe we could give women these hormones and that would help. Now, this is the first thing they do. If you go to your doctor and say, I've been trying for a baby for a year, we've had no success whatsoever, it's been, it's really affecting us, we really want to have a baby, the first thing they might try, once they've done some general tests to make sure that there's no issue with sperm or anything like that, they'll give you some FSH and LH tablets. I say you, of course, I mean the woman. She'll then take those tablets, and hopefully, if she takes it at the right time, your doctor will tell her when to take the different tablets, she'll release an egg normally, and she'll be able to get pregnant. And about 20% of women will be fixed is the wrong word, will be helped that way. So that's excellent. That's really good. But it's only 20%, that leaves 80% of women who still have an issue. And some of that will be because of what the man is doing, some of it will be because of what the woman's doing. It's no one to blame, but there's only one other way which we need to know about, which we can help those people. And this is bypassing the issue of conception altogether. So we're talking about physical issues, having a tube that isn't working, or a lack of sperm, an issue with the man. What could doctors do? I'm sure you've all heard of test tube babies, or if you've used the right term, IVF. And that's what we're going to look at now. Now I know there will be some people probably watching this video who are IVF babies. It's relatively common. And this process is used a lot because there are a lot of people who do struggle to have babies. So you'll probably know someone who is an IVF baby, even if you don't know that they are. So, in general, what we're looking at is we're talking about taking the egg out of the woman and placing it with sperm in a petri dish or test tube, allowing it to develop into a small bunch of cells before putting it back in the woman. But we need to know the details of this a bit more in depth. So we're going to look at that in a bit more detail now. So, the first step, we give the woman FSH. Just write that down. One step, we give the woman FSH. Why? Hopefully you're all thinking, FSH, well that makes eggs develop. We're going to need an egg for this to happen, so we need to give her FSH to make an egg develop. Now, I'm actually going to ask to skip these questions, we'll come back to them later. Next, we take the eggs which are released and we place them in a petri dish with some sperm from the father. How we get the sperm from the father, you can imagine for yourself, but it's a much simpler process than giving any FSH, excuse me. So that's step 2. We're going to mix the sperm with the egg in a petri dish. Now that petri dish is also going to have some nutrients in it, various bits to keep the embryo alive, and we're going to keep that embryo very happy in a nice warm environment with some nutrients in a petri dish. We allow it to grow into a ball of cells. Now that makes it more likely to implant successfully. Now, basically, some of the issues women have are the egg not attaching itself correctly into the inside of the womb. So by allowing it to grow to a small ball of cells, when we attach it, we're hoping that it will grow much better and will be attached more easily. And at this bottom point, it allows it to be tested for diseases. Well, now the point of that is that sometimes people have genetic diseases, and therefore, if they would have a baby, they might have, I don't know, a 50% or a 75% or even a 100% chance of passing on this disease to their baby. And if that disease is particularly nasty, you don't want to do that. So what you do is you have IVF. You get some egg and some sperm, you mix them together, and then the doctor, named scientist more likely, is able to test each of these embryos, find one which doesn't have the genetic disease, we can choose that one. Now there are obviously ethical issues here. We'll come to the ethical issue of this actually in year 11, we're going to study this in more detail. So I know there are ethical issues if you're thinking that, we'll come back to that if that's alright. Now, final step, we're going to place the fetus back into the woman's uterus. And you can see, excuse me, down this picture down the bottom, you have an ultrasound. What is happening is we're using a speculum, which basically holds the cervix open, and we're going to insert this pipette basically into the uterus lining and place it in. We're going to use ultrasound to guide us so that we know we're not putting it in the wrong place. It's actually very precise where it has to go, and so the doctor has to be very skilled to get it in just the right place. You usually put in more than one because the chances of success for each one are actually relatively low. And it's worth noting that each time you do this, it's only about 25 to 35% effective. And if you have to do it more than once, it gets less and less effective, because basically if it's failed once, it's likely to fail again. You get 3 rounds on the NHS of IVF, so it can go wrong twice, and then they'll do one more, and then you have to pay for a private clinic. And after those 3 rounds, it's about 50% success rate. So it's really, really difficult to get pregnant even this way. Pregnancy is not guaranteed. And for some women who really want a baby, it can be extremely expensive, particularly in countries where you have to pay for your medicine, like America. But even here, if you want more than 3 rounds, it can be very expensive. And therefore, we put in more than 1 egg. Because if you only put in 1, the likelihood of success will be even lower. Difficulty is, if you do this, you're also much more likely to have twins and triplets. Because if more than 1 of these eggs you're putting inside survives, then you have a twin or a triplet. And so twins and triplets are more likely to be produced from IVF than from normal sex. Fine. Let's look at some questions on this. 4 questions. I'd like you to have a go at them. You should have notes in your book already, so I don't really need these to be in full sentences. You just have a go at these 4 questions and pause me. Right. FSH in IVF is used to make an egg develop. That's because we need an egg in order to put some sperm on it. We then take that egg out, usually using a needle. In what manner is the sperm added to the egg? It's added in a petri dish directly. Why is the egg not immediately added to the woman's uterus? To allow it to grow, to make it more likely to implant, and so we can test it for any diseases. What's the final stage of IVF? How is it done? The final stage is to place it back into the woman's womb with a number of other eggs, and that's used ultrasound to make that happen. Hopefully we all got that. Nice, straightforward, nice process that works quite well. And it is more successful than just having sex, but there's still a good chance of it failing. Fine. Negatives of IVF. What can you think of? And can you write me a little list in your book? So I'm going to go through this. It's quite important to know. Okay. Hopefully you paused me again. Right. Low success rate we talked about. Requires hormones tablets. Whenever you put more hormones into anybody's body, it affects them in different ways. FSH does other jobs as well. So the moment you take more FSH, it can affect a woman's body and her emotions as well, her mindset and her mental health. So there are difficulties there. Ethical issues. Basically, whenever you are deciding which embryo to put in, there's an ethical issue of, are you making a designer baby? The idea being that what we don't want is to be, for instance, some people are allowed to select their baby because it's male rather than female, or because it's blonde rather than brown haired, because it's got blue eyes rather than brown eyes. You get very quickly, if you're not careful, into kind of Aryanism, where you're picking only the best qualities, and that is something we want to avoid, obviously. So designer babies are a bad thing. You're only allowed to discriminate between the eggs based on genetic diseases at the moment. And multiple children, we said they're more likely to have accidental twins or triplets than normal sex. You may not think that's a downside. Of course, there's a lot of issues in pregnancy and in birth. Obviously, you can do it, but it makes it very unpleasant for the woman, much more unpleasant than usual. Fine. Now we're going to look at some questions now. I'm going to finish off with some exam questions, and then the lesson will be over. But can you please make sure you do these exam questions, because they are important. Right, first part of this particular question, name glands A and B. So have a look. Hopefully you wrote down A, pituitary, B, ovaries. And the ovaries are glands. People don't think of the ovaries as glands. The reason is they produce estrogen and progesterone, therefore they're a gland. Gland A produces the hormone follicle-stimulating hormone. Well, you knew that already. FSH controls changes in gland B. How does it move from gland A to gland B? I hope you're starting to see a pattern here. They often ask this question, don't they? Don't write it down. How do hormones get around the body? Through the blood. And I'm hoping that everyone knew that. Right. Tick box exercise here. Woman not able to become pregnant. Woman does not produce mature eggs. The woman decides to have an in vitro fertilization treatment. Which two hormones will help the woman produce and release eggs? Have a look at that. Again, don't write it down. So hopefully you wrote FSH and LH. FSH makes the egg develop. LH makes the egg get released. And giving these hormones to the woman helps her to produce several mature eggs. Doctors collect the mature eggs from the woman in operation, describe how the mature eggs are used in IVF treatment so that the woman may become pregnant. 3 marks. Just summarise the other stages basically. So pause me. Can you write this one down, please? Right. So, first step, it's mixed with sperm in a petri dish. Second step, it's allowed to grow to a certain size, tested for genetic defects so that it is easy to implant. Third step is implanted into the uterus of a woman. It's 3 marks. And then finally, I think, no, I'm wrong, there's 2. IVF clinics have been set a target to reduce multiple births because it's difficult for women. At least 76% of IVF treatments result in single babies. It's just one reason why the clinics have been set this target to reduce multiple birth. I just gave you that answer, unfortunately. So the idea is to reduce the likelihood of difficulties with birth, difficulties in pregnancy, the need for cesarean sections, this kind of an idea. Right, this one I will try not to give you the answer for. So give that a look at. Right, so let's move on with this question. So hopefully you wrote that there's a much larger number of people, a larger number of treatments in Clinic R. And the reason that matters is because it's much more likely to be repeatable. That word repeatable is key in 2008. You have done 1,000 different treatments. 200 of them resulted in pregnancy. About 20%, that's actually relatively low. It's very likely that it's going to be the same-ish in 2008. Because I've done 1,000. And so this is likely to be representative of a real value. If I've only done 2, and both of them have resulted in pregnancy, that's 100%, great. But that doesn't mean if I do 2 again in 2008, I'm going to get 100% again, because it's likely to be a fluke. I've only done 2. Same way here, I did 1,000 in R, and 200 of them resulted in pregnancy, great. That means I can be very confident that if I did it again, it would be another 20-ish%, and they've done 18 to 23, fine. I've done 98 in Clinic S. 20 of those resulted in pregnancy, again about 20%, just under. They're saying between 3 and 56% in 2008, because having only done 98, you really don't know whether those 20 were representative. It makes it less likely to be repeatable, i.e. it's less likely that you could do it again and get the same results. Fine. So let's have a quick flick through the mark schemes, check your answers if you didn't already. So pituitary and ovaries we talked about, FSH and LH we talked about. In terms of the extra stages, fertilised or reference to sperm, so just sperm is fine. Forms an embryo or allowed to grow into an embryo that's inserted into the mother's womb or uterus. This idea of multiple births causing possible harm to the mother. And then we didn't do question C, so we're looking at larger numbers in Clinic R, results likely to be repeatable. Fine. That's the end of that lesson. Hopefully that's been useful to you. From today's lesson you need to know what IVF is and how it works, how we could use FSH and LH to treat women who are not ovulating correctly, and some other reasons why people might be infertile. Not a difficult lesson, as you saw from those final questions. As long as you know the science, generally you can get most of the marks. Right, have a good day. Looking forward to seeing you back in school whenever possible.